So I'd like to welcome everyone to our September advocacy meeting. Today, we are going to be talking about Three Fields, our republishing of the book. And I'm just going to give a brief little synopsis. So the Arc of Florida is republishing Three Fields Brothers with an additional but equally compelling viewpoint. The original was written by Anderson Burke and outlines his family's journey. He discovers the journals of his recently deceased mother, which document the heartache of giving up her third son and the effect this had on the family. Andy set out to find and meet his lost sibling. For a time, he was neighbors with Cassie Jackson, the executive director of the Ark of the St. John's, and as their friendship grew, she asked him to tell his story. His brother Eddie was a client at the Ark of the St. John's. In the newer edition, Three Fields, a brother, a sister, Dick Bradley adds his account. He tells the story of his sister, also with intellectual and developmental disabilities, with a completely different outcome. His story is one of love and happiness within the family dynamic. With so many similarities between Andy, Dick, and their families, this new edition is a gripping story which conveys the importance of support and acceptance for each and every family. So with that being said, we have Dick Bradley with us today, and we have Kathy Jackson with the Ark of the St. John's. Andy Burke is vacationing and is not in Wi-Fi service area. So unfortunately, he will not be joining us. But I did just kind of want to start and give Dick and Kathy a moment to tell us a little bit about themselves, and then we'll get into the story. Kathy can kind of pitch it about the first edition, and Dick can talk about his purpose and goals for participating in the second one. And then we can just open it up for questions and answers from anyone. And you can certainly put items in the chat as well. So with that being said, I will let Kathy start since she had a hand in the first edition.
Yes, it was a really exciting moment. I think it's somewhere definitely in the middle of the book where it talks about the email that Andy gets about a month after his mother passes away, Betty, and the discovery of his mother's journals hidden in a closet that he finds and gathers them all up and lays them on her bed, while he is spending the entire day reading through the journals and discovering that this long lost brother, who he thought was totally disconnected from his mother, was actually not. She was active in his life, as we're all very familiar with IEPs, individual education plans, and support plans, that she participated that actively through correspondence. She also tried to keep in touch in other ways, such as sending birthday cards and holiday cards. She shared photographs of her family with Eddie, and she followed him from the very beginning, where after the placement of Eddie into the institution in Gainesville, he then was placed into the institution in Marianna. It was at that time when the state of Florida was really actively trying to find placement or deinstitutionalize some of its institutions, and ask providers, community providers, ARCs mainly, to reach out and see if they would participate in that process. And so ARC St. John's did. And we were sent Eddie's files and discovered that his family lived in Jacksonville, and thought it would make a great placement to get him closer to his family. And so Eddie entered into services in the 90s. And so, as I say, his mother did keep in touch with him in a very indirect way. And then suddenly I get the email from Andy a month after his mom passed away, and he's found his mother's journals. So anyway, he reached out to me by email. It was on a Friday afternoon. I remember it very vividly. It was about 4 o'clock. I was shutting down my office and discovered this email, and it was from him. And I tell you, I had to sit for almost an hour before I could actually reply, as he is reaching out, asking if we were familiar with Eddie and was he in our services. So I was extremely thoughtful in what I wanted to say to him because I wanted the connection to be a good one, a sibling to a sibling, a sibling to a sibling. And so there it went, discovering that Andy actually was my uh, neighbor 5 blocks down from my house. And as Dina mentioned, as the connection continued, we got to be very dear friends. And I just noticed that he had a heavy heart, that there had been so many years that he questioned, what had gone on in his family and what had happened to Eddie, and the what it brought to his mother every time he would try to mention his brother. And so he learned early on that it was best not to talk about that, because it brought such heartache to her. And so he wanted to make amends. And that journey was spectacular, of watching these two brothers get together. And later on, if I have a chance, there is a part of the book that I would like to read. But I have so enjoyed in staying in touch with Andy, even long after the death of his brother, and to see, that meant so much in his life, to have had that opportunity, of discovering a long lost sibling.
Wow. Thank you. Dick, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and your thoughts and goals and when writing your part of the republishing?
Sure. I wish Andy was here because he was really, he and Kathy were kind of the inspiration of the whole thing, obviously, and he's a much better storyteller than I am. But anyway, my name's Dick Bradley. I'm scanning the names here, and of course I recognized a few of them, but not so many anymore. I have been retired from the ARC in Gainesville since what was it, 2015, I think it was. January 2015. Is that right? Sound right, Mark?
It does, yeah.
And I was there about 18 years, but I originally Fort Myers, and good old Irish Catholic family. There were 7 kids. I was the second oldest, and then my brother Roger, who ended up being the director of the ARC there in Fort Myers for, I don't know, 20 some odd years, was third. And then our sister Kathy, who was born with Down syndrome in 1955, was in the middle. And then there were 2 more boys and a girl. I forgot to mention my oldest brother. So Jim, me, Roger, Kathy, Chris, Brian, Carolyn. When Kathy was born in 1955, Fort Myers was nothing like it is today, believe me. Very small, little provincial kind of place on the southwest coast. And of course, there were no services whatsoever. And at that time in Florida, there was no requirement under state law to serve people in public schools that were under a certain IQ, and my sister was certainly under that criterion. So fortunately, the ARC had been started there in I think it was 1953 for them, and she began attending there and did so throughout her natural life. She died at age 60, but she was a real inspiration for particularly Roger and I. We both ended up spending our entire professional career, working with people with intellectual disabilities, and it's been extremely rewarding. I can't imagine having done anything else now that I look back on it. And so anyway, I mean, it was an interesting time. Again, there were no services at all, and the universal, I think Eddie Burke was born in 1960, so that was about 5 years later. But in 1955, both of my parents were very well-educated people. My dad was a graduate of Yale Medical School. My mother had a master's degree in nursing from Yale School of Nursing, very highly educated. But when she was born, they knew practically nothing about the condition. I mean, of course, they knew it existed, but they didn't know anything about it. And so they went about, checking all of their contacts here, there, and everywhere at major teaching hospitals, and people that they had taught them in medical school, nursing school, and all of that, and people that they had met around the country for advice. And the universal advice that they got was to put her in an institution as soon as they could, because she would be a, quote, disruptive influence on the family, unquote. And that was kind of the way it was back then. I mean, that was the expert view of developmental disabilities, particularly, at her level. She would have had an IQ of about 32, I think, 33, maybe. So they looked around, and they looked at various things, and they looked at private homes. And at that time, the only state service really was what's now Tocatali in Gainesville. So they went up and visited that, and there were no vacancies at that time for for infants and toddlers. So they were told to, they put her on a waiting list, et cetera. So, and they were told to, she would be better off when she did go if she could learn as much as she could before, about self-care and feeding herself and things like that. So, the family basically, it got to the point where she got to the top of the waiting list. I think she was probably about 2 years old, something like that. My mom and dad sat the three older brothers down and said, here we go. What do you want to do? And we kind of all decided immediately that we wanted her to stay with us, because everybody had, bonded with her, and that was our sister, and it was the only one we had at that time anyway. So we decided to keep her home, and that was best for her, as it turned out, and it was best for all of us as well. We all helped out with her and helped teach her how to feed herself and dress herself and all of that. And, for someone with an IQ of that level, she became a very, very functional individual. When she'd be in her 20s and so and on, she would set her alarm clock. I don't think she knew what time is or was, but she could set her alarm clock for when she knew she had to get up. And she would get up on her own, make her own breakfast, pick out her own clothes, catch the bus to ARC, work in their wood shop, come home, do her exercises. The only meal that she really didn't cook on her own was the hot meal at dinner time. But she achieved a lot. She was an avid Olympian, Special Olympian. She even participated in the International Olympics in Spain, whatever year that was. I don't remember what it was, but she did that. But she did just about every sport known to man that Special Olympics did. The last couple of years, she did the equestrian program. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. Kathy called me one day out of the blue, and I don't remember. Must have been probably about, I don't know, 2010, 2011, 2012, somewhere in there, telling me about Andy, and that Andy wanted to come over and talk to me. I said, sure, absolutely. So Andy came over, and we spent a few hours and just had a great time talking to each other. I just was so impressed with him that he wanted to, after all those years, he was so compelled to attach to not reattached, but really attached to his brother. Um, and so, and then he wrote his book, and he devoted a couple pages to kind of my family's story and my sister and all of that. And I thought the book was great. I recommended it to everybody and sent it to everybody that I knew that I knew. So anyway, and then Alan came up with the idea of expanding it. So they asked me to, I guess fill in the blanks on our story. And so I did the best I could on that. And I think the final product is just really, really, just the comparison and contrast of the stories. I think
Yes.
it's so compelling for people that are interested in the population and interested in the idea of, how much can these people do for themselves, and how functional can they be if given the opportunity. And even Eddie in his situation, who went to I guess originally to Takachali and then to Mariana and then to Kathy. But I mean, he did pretty well for himself. Just I think the comparison and the contrasting outcome and the two different stories is just extremely compelling to me. And I hope.
Yes.
Dick, first of all, I'd like to say I really appreciate that you added your story to the book, because when I first read it, I read that one paragraph about your family, and I'm sitting there going, this is the other half of the equation, and this is relevant to families today. People have children with disabilities, and some might think immediately this is the worst thing that could happen, but if they read the book, they'll realize that it could be a blessing. There's something there that really stood out. So Dick, I wanted to appreciate you willing to tell your family story and your sister's story. I would want you to mention my favorite part of your part of the story was the part where you were talking about your sister working when they had vacation and stuff, and how she would behave during that time, even though her brother was the CEO of the ARC down there. Was it her brother that was the CEO down there, or was that
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
And just tell a little about that, about how she felt about work and how it played with vacation time.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, she worked at the ARC from the time that kind of, at the end of the quote unquote schooling period that we have these days at the age of 21 or whatever it is. She worked there, until a couple months before she passed away at age 60. And it was just, I want to say it was the most important aspect of her life, including her family. I mean, her job to her was just everything. She would, she was so proud of her paycheck. And I mean, she'd make what, $30, $40, $50 a week, something like that. And she ran, table saws and, industrial equipment. They make shipping pallets. I don't know if they still do, but in Fort Myers there, they made shipping pallets and survey stakes, things like that. So she ran some pretty good industrial equipment with proper safety measures in place, but she just loved her job. And so she lived with my mom until the last about 7 or 8 years. My mom had some TIAs, transient ischemic attacks, and wasn't, completely herself anymore. And she was a little bit worried about making sure Kathy was doing okay in all aspects of her life. So the last 6 or 7 years, she actually lived in a private group home. But prior to that, she would go to a summer camp up in Orlando. I forget it was run by, it's a big organization there. I forget the name of it now. But she would go to there for a couple of weeks every summer, for her good, and I think to give my mom a break too. But when she knew it was coming because she had her calendar. Again, I don't think she knew much about time and months, and dates, and stuff like that. But every year she kept a calendar of her important dates. transferred that every year to a new calendar. She would see it coming and start bitching and complaining and moaning about having to go to camp because she was going to lose her job. And she was just, I don't know if she was really convinced, but she would act like she was very convinced that she was going to lose her job if she took time off. Well, the ARC there in Fort Myers had, vacation time for the people who worked. So she had vacation time coming, and my brother Roger was the CEO, so there wasn't any way on God's green earth that she was going to lose, quote unquote, lose her job. But and then when she got there, it was fine. She knew a bunch of people and she had old friends and all of that. But it was every year the same routine. And she was just, I'm going to lose my job, my job, my job. And she just started kind of crying a little bit, just try to talk my mom how to go. But yeah, that was, like I said, I'm not sure she really believed it, but boy, she sure acted like she believed it.
The other thing that I remember reading in the book, and Kathy, maybe you can comment on this, is the mother. The mother was so devastated when she had the child born with
Yes.
Down. And I guess in the 60s, early 60s, late 50s, they would tell parents that you don't have your child come home with you. You put your child in an institution. It's best for them. And that's where the title of the book came from, Three Fields. What are your thoughts regarding that time and stuff? Because you were working in the industry for, when
Right.
did you start working in the industry?
Yes, I started 1979.
Okay.
So I'd been around for, quite a while, but yes, that was common back then that doctors would recommend because it first of all, the birth of a child with a special need was stressful. It was not exactly what a family had planned for. So they didn't really have many resources. So that was typically the response of the doctor. And the institution served as a place where they could take their child for the care that they needed and let their family move on to tend to the others. So that was the case. And it's interesting. I want to circle back again a little bit, but Dick's sister was born in 1955. Her name is Kathy. I was born in 1955. My name is Kathy. So I got to know the Bradley family very early on as I joined the ARC family in 1979. So, that was what we talked about back then because community-based services were all getting established about that point. And so the very first movement was reaching out into our communities and connecting with families who kept their family member at home. And we would encourage them to let their family member come to a day program. And so that's how most of the ARC started. Some evolved into different things, but it was a fabulous period of time in watching throughout the state of Florida the deinstitutionalization movement of people moving out of mainly Talcachali. That was the largest state institution in Florida, and there were others scattered throughout the state as well. But for about a 10-year period, all the ARCs were getting, established and accepting individuals. And then the move from the state institution directly into community-based. And a lot of times that was through the group homes that we had opened up. But the Bradley family and the Burke family were so very similar that, to the point that both fathers were actually doctors, and so doctors were telling doctors the best approach to it. And so the fascination of the book for me was knowing Dick and then now meeting Andy and just seeing the similarity in my head as I got to know Andy and knowing that it was two different paths in life that the families took and what it did to those families. And it's like Dick is talking about, it was a blessing for them two sat around that kitchen table and said, we have bonded with our sister. We don't want to take her. Whereas in the Burke situation, that it was so devastating to Betty, the mother, to have realized what she feared of having a child with Down syndrome, and all that was in her head, and her inability, to connect. And there was just not much support for her at that time in that bleak moment. And that when she brought the baby home, Andy, he had some kind of an attack where he couldn't breathe. And so her brother ended up holding the child up and pounding him on the back to get the breathing started again. And from there, she just simply couldn't do it. And so in the interim of waiting on the waiting list, there were families scattered throughout the state of Florida that would open up their homes, just kind of like foster care, and accept a child until their number came up on the waiting list. And that would typically be a year or two after the birth of the child. And so when that occurred for Betty, she had placed her son, and so when the call came, though, she wanted to be the one to take him and place him into Gainesville. And that part of the book is so moving, of her holding her son, her third child, holding her in her arms as her sister-in-law drove her from Jacksonville to Gainesville, and how difficult it was for her in that journey to know that that would probably be the end of their relationship. But after she placed Andy, she did try to return, but the sorrow that she felt at abandonment of her child, and just the insecurities that she had as a mom, became overwhelming and really affected her life for the rest of her life. She and her husband ended up divorcing, and her leading a very quiet life by herself. Whereas in comparison, you've got, the Bradley family, that, as he describes it, as this, Irish Catholic family with a group home of 7, with all of them very connected and loving, and teaching their sister Kathy how to do every single thing that was possible for her, including, the playing outside in the yard, the kids who may have started to make fun of Kathy, and them standing up and saying, "You leave my sister alone," the protections that they provided, all of the love and companionship that they had in comparison. So, it explains when Andy turned around after the death of his mother, that his heart was there was such a spot in there that he needed to get that resolved, that he needed to make up for what his parents couldn't do. And towards the end, there's a part in the book where he finally convinces his father, who's still alive, retired doctor, to get in his car and make the trek from Jacksonville to St. Augustine. And it was in the month of October. And of course, I'm sure that Herbert, that was his name, was very anxious. And so they talked, the whole way down, until suddenly they're in the driveway of the group home here in St. Augustine where Andy lived, and his meeting of his father, and his father meeting him after all those many years, of what it was. It was a beautiful connection. It was beautifully written. In the beginning, it's the hard tale of all of that. And then in the end, it ends with Dick's story, which is very upbeat and fun. I think one of my favorite parts of his section was his sister Kathy. Early on, I guess they taught her how to answer the home phone. As if you grew up in that period of time, you had a home phone. We didn't have cell phones. And so that home phone was very important because their father was a doctor. And so the emergency calls or whatever would come in through the home phone. But they taught Kathy how to answer the phone. And so she got used to answering, "This is Dr. Bradley. can I help you, or whatever, it was that the little saying that she had. And she continued that on after even her father's death. So I thought that was kind of a light part of the book too. But it's also chock full of history, telling the story of institutions, telling the evolution in the beginning of when our United States discovered that they had individuals that needed assistance and what direction they were going to go in. And all the states were, looking at the development of institutions. And then, of course, in the end, it goes through the section that Alan created, which was the history of the ARC and the milestones that were created and the wonderful things that we were able to accomplish. If I were to say that what I look to in the future is important, it's the fact that we have to make a decision that community-based services are here to stay and must thrive, or we will return back to a point where the state will have to take on that responsibility that they have for institutionalization. So it's so very important for the ARC and for all providers that we encourage and demand from our legislators who are responsible for funding this, that we need to quit this year to year, decision about how much of an increase we might get or may not get. We should be brought into the revenue estimating decision where a certain part of the allocation should automatically be given and be tied into a cost of living. That's what we continue to fight for. I hope that a day will come where I see that happen.
Well, I thought it was important to add at the end of the book that the ARC chapter, the ARC of Florida, how it paralleled the story in our advocacy. And I see Michael Messer here, and he's part of the history of the ARC from the ARC of South Florida on their board, and was the CEO at some point of ARC of South Florida. But the advocacy goes deep. All the good stuff that's happened, whether it be stopping the execution of people with disabilities, to having a Bill of Rights for people with disabilities, and on and on and on, is the ARC story. And I think you see some of the story there. And the legacy is, people like Dick Bradley, who dedicated his life, inspired by his sister. I don't know other way to say it, because I don't know if that's what would you have done if your life was if you didn't know your sister? Were you headed this way anyway, working to be an advocate for people with disabilities and serving them, Dick?
No, no, I was gonna become a doctor and go into practice as a surgeon with my dad. It was my original plan, but yeah, so.
Well, you're still serving on the Developmental Disability Council, I believe.
Yeah, I am. I haven't been to any meetings because I guess I haven't had any in-person ones for a couple of years now, but because of the pandemic. But I'm way overdue to be kicked off. I can tell you that. I think the statute allows you to be on for, I want to say 8 years, and I think I've been on like 14 or 15 or something. I don't know. They won't let me go.
And I see Michael on. Michael, can you take it off mute?
Yeah, let's open it up for questions too. We're gonna unmute people. There you go.
Michael, when did you start working in disabilities at ARC of South Florida, and before that? What year was it?
Actually, I started in 1984.
Okay.
Back in the days when we were just starting to talk about deinstitutionalization and things that were going on. And it was a very interesting and in a way an overwhelming position, because I had not grown up in that. And so it was just very different. Everything from talking to very strong advocates who were committed to deinstitutionalization and having children in the community and things, to talking to parents who kept their children at home and regretted it because their whole life had gone to taking care of their child. So it was just very interesting. In some ways, it kind of broke my heart as I was doing that, but I felt it was very important. I remember doing things with Kathy and Dick and Roger, and I never met Andy. I never met Kathy Bradley, but it was just such an important thing to do.
But you know that the Kathy Bradley story with her work and stuff. I know I talked to Mark Swain a lot during this last session because, you know, one of the things that's important for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is choice also. And when they were misinterpreting the federal law to not allow certain people to work, people with disabilities to work in adult day training that would not find a job outside, I thought about how great it was and the dignity of work that Kathy Bradley had, that a lot of our clients are not going to be able to have now because they said you couldn't work in an adult day training and pay for the supports needed. And Mark, you might want to comment on that. Mark Swain, who, by the way, is the CEO of Art Gainesville now that Dick Bradley used to be the CEO of. It's a small world.
The first thing I have to say is, you know, these stories are just amazing. And I read the book. I couldn't put it down. I read the whole thing in one day. And it brought back so many memories and thinking about families and how important children are and those bonds of siblings. And you know, Dick Bradley's story is so interesting. You have this highly educated family with plenty of resources that this wrench is thrown into the mix. And they didn't know what to do, and the story just unfolded. And I find with the people that I know with developmental disabilities and families, the stories unfold, and they unfold differently. And my heart really went out to the other family, the mother in the book, that ended up going to the institution, driving by there, always longing for her child, and really, really quite heartbroken. Some of that was just so meaningful and really makes one pay attention to the family dynamics and how, just in general, how important people are. And, you know, across time, how far behind the 8 ball people with developmental disabilities have had it, and they're, you know, and they're so marginalized, and it can be so difficult, and it's not easy having a developmental disability. It's not easy living in a group home. You know, it's not easy going through all of this. And what makes all the difference in the world are those supports. However the story unfolds, however it happens to how it happens to unfold, and families' stories unfold in different ways, and they all have to be understood and taken in the dynamic and the heavy heart and the light heart and the bitter sweetness of all of it is just so incredible. And I think about, you know, the people that I serve, and I think about parents that I know, and, you know, what they've been through, good and bad. And parents that are aging and wondering what's going to happen to their adult child when they're no longer here, and they're looking at an unstable system, you know, with a heavy heart. And for sure, I related to Dick also when he talked about his sister Kathy loving her job. You know, we worked hard here to have people be employed. We have Gone Forever. We have a great shredding company. We have over 40 contracts within the Gainesville area, and our people do really meaningful work. And they don't do piecework anymore. They make minimum wage. They're so dang proud of this job. They get a paycheck. They just love it. And yeah, the recent rule changes are really a challenge for these folks. You know, when they reinterpreted the settings rule, you know, the federal rule was okay with folks making money while they were being supervised in a day program, as long as it wasn't the primary purpose of that day program. Because a lot of the folks that I serve, they really need, with their particular diagnosis, supervision in order to remain healthy and safe. They can end up in the emergency room in 5 minutes. And at the same time, they really want to work. So the interpretation in Florida that took that right away is really troubling, and we're trying to work around it. And there's always struggles, and that's why the advocacy is just so important. And I think Kathy and Dick outline this perfectly. And we do. In the end, we have to make a decision. Are we going to keep this on a drip diet? Are we going to keep people with developmental disabilities living on the edge, constantly? Or are we going to, you know, make a decision as a state, as a group of people, to put what needs to be into this system to make sure it's maintained, so these families that are dealing with these issues at least don't have to fight the system over and over every day on top of what they're already dealing with as their story unfolds.
Let me make a real quick observation about the aspect of work as well, and apply to my sister as well as everybody else I've ever run into. It's not just the idea that they're proud of what they do, and you know, the work is important to them. But if you think about your own life, most of the people that we know, most of the people that we relate to, many of our friends are people that we've met through work. And the same applies to the people in your programs. Many of their friends they met through there, and to disallow them to continue that association, that was one of the last straws for me before I retired, when they were talking about not having sheltered workshops for people, you know, people who, with an IQ like my sister, 20, 30, that you know, they're not going to get competitive employment. Let's be realistic about it out in the real world. And the people that they work with there are not going to be their friends. They're not going to be people that they, you know, associate with after work. Whereas the people that our folks meet at work at a sheltered workshop are going to be people that they associate with after work. They are going to be their friends. That's the saddest thing about that rule change to me. I was so angry about that. I wanted to just whack somebody up there. Everybody in Tallahassee, they always know better than everybody else, even though many of them have never done any of this stuff and have no direct association with anybody that receives these services. It just fries me to no end.
Well, let me say this to Dick. Even though the rule has changed, we haven't stopped employment for a single person, and we're not going to. We're going to figure out a way to make this whole thing work. And your spirit is still alive here, and the people that work here, everything that you said is hugely important. And that's one of the reasons why the Arc of Alachua County didn't stop. And we're going to keep that right going for these folks.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other? Okay, I see Nicole's hand is raised. Go ahead,
Yes.
Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to come on here and listen to this because I am a person with a developmental disability on the waiver currently, and I receive services and support to be able to live as fulfilled daily as I can. And I wanted to ask for some suggestions, because tomorrow in my county, I will be able to visit the legislative office of Pasadena. And I have my talking points that I want to talk with her about in my county. But as a group and as I've listened to the conversations of all of you, is there a talking point that I should also bring up as 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 we are wanting to continue to let them know that the waiver needs to stay and the services need to stay for everyone, no matter the level of need or urgency or anything of that nature? Is there anything that I should add to my talking points? So when I meet with her tomorrow, I can mention that.
Well, first of all, kudos to you, Nicole, for going and talking to your legislatures. That's awesome. I think just the fact that you are going to be there telling her what's important is going to speak, volumes. I don't know, Alan, do you want to suggest
well-
something else to Nicole?
Yeah, first of all, Nicole, I mean, what you're doing is the reason we're gonna have success. You know, a lot of us who advocate really are there to support you. And it's so important. And not only are you meeting a senator, you're meeting with the Senate president who can make things happen. I met with her about a month ago, and I gave her the book, Three Fields. The book that we're talking about, I gave her, asked her to read it so she understood some of the issues that people met with her. But she wants to talk to people that the I budget impacts. That's how she's going to learn. She's not going to learn from me. I would just tell her your story. Tell her your story, and she'll understand.
I will, and Alan, I see you on different calls, so when I see you again, I will make sure to tell you directly, because I thank you for supporting us so much, because it is very hard with all of the state of Florida, but I have no idea why it is so difficult in Collier County, which is in Naples, Florida, and other parts of Florida, but if I have to be the face of Collier County, I will be.
Good
I'm
for
very
you.
proud of you. Very
Good
proud
for
of you.
you. Thanks.
Very good.
Cheryl, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. I'm also a SIB, for those that know that terminology, and me and my husband have been here for about 10 years. I actually ended up choosing to put my brother in ICF because I saw the writing on the wall in the state of Florida as far as not trusting APD and not trusting an APD group home. I'm in Manatee County and they're awful. They're just awful to even look at. There is no ARC over on this side. There might be in Pinellas and Hillsborough, but there's not in Manatee or Sarasota County anymore. Also in the process of writing a book. My father died in October of 2020 and left me with the mess of trying to figure things out on my own. And I don't have any other siblings or anybody else to rely on. I give kudos to those that keep fighting the legislation, because our local delegates know exactly who I am and they'll run in the other direction. They don't want to have the conversation. So does their gatekeepers. They know exactly who I am, and I'm pretty sure my email is blocked at this point. It's a mess, and I mean, I think we're gonna end up leaving Florida because with the stuff going on in politics and the protesting going on with the white supremacy, my siblings on the chopping block just as much as somebody of color, or any kind of, that's not white male. I don't know. I give you guys credit because I just can't I just can't fight it.
Cheryl, as long as you stay in Florida, please continue advocating. I think that there's hope. We're finding people coming together more and more. In fact, I'll send you a link to an advocacy group that's meeting, but we're trying to meet with every legislature with 10 families. We want them to know that they're not going to be silent. We're not going to be silent anymore. So we are working hard, and I think there's hope given the leadership that's coming up in the next year that really cares about people with disabilities. In fact, the speaker has a brother with a disability, and you know, him knowing and living the situation, I think is going to be helpful. And the next Senate president is one of the most passionate people I know for vulnerable people. So there is hope, I think.
Well, I'm glad you feel it because I definitely feel pretty hopeless about the situation. I mean, I couldn't find an APD house for my brother that met my standards. He came from New York where he was neglected to the point of multiple organ failure. So I think I've just lost hope in all of the systems, regardless of state. But I will pick up the book. I'm curious. I had an aunt with Down syndrome as well that was born in that generation. So I will definitely look forward to reading it. And so maybe give me inspiration to finish mine.
Thank you, Cheryl.
I
Any
did
other
put,
comments?
I did put a link in the chat so you can take a look at our website. We do have information on the authors. Pre-sale is available, pre-orders, I should say, and with it going on sale to the general public October 15th. But if we don't have any more, I don't see any more questions or comments. We really appreciate Kathy and Dick. Oh, Michael, there you go. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I just wanted to make one or two additional quick comments. The first was that my recollection is the way almost all the ARCs got started, not only just the ARCs in Florida, but all of the ARCs got started, was with a small group of parents sitting around the kitchen table having a cup of coffee and saying, what can we do for our kids? And that's how they joined together and they became a voice and a force. And I think that that's still an appropriate thing to do. And there are other creative services I think that the ARCs can help provide. I know we ran into a big issue down here in Miami from parents saying, I don't know what's going to happen to my kid after I die because there's nobody to look out for them. And we started a guardianship program. So at least, you know, we could tell those parents that there would be somebody watching out for their children. So there's lots of things that can still be done, but I don't think we can forget the influence and the power of parents. And I think we need to keep those people coming together.
Thank you.
Can I say one other thing, Dean?
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Nick.
So there's no misunderstanding. Andy and I make absolutely nothing on this. Any profit, if any, and I don't even know what the profit structure is, if there is one, but if it does, it goes to the ARC of Florida. We don't make 1 penny anywhere in any fashion. So.
Thank you. Well, again, so Kathy and Dick, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to talk about your stories. And like I said, if you have any other questions, you can email us directly or check it out on our website.
Dina, if you have time, Anna had her hand up.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, go ahead. Where is she?
She's at the bottom of the screen. Anna.
I didn't mean to, am I muted?
No, we can hear you now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to put my hand up, but I did want to ask, I put it in the chat, but you guys probably missed it because I couldn't jump on until right at the end. Alan, if you don't mind sending me an email with more information about the advocacy group. I met with Kathy a while back about starting something similar at the Arc of St. John's. I want to make it, I want to bring parents together and bring self-advocacy together. But I think having something somewhere else and showing people like, hey, this is happening elsewhere. It's not just us. We can pull this together. I think that would be really powerful. So I'd love more information.
You know,
I'm in.
Well, thanks, Anna. Dina just put on our website under advocacy. No, it's not under advocacy. Where you
Our community partners.
Community partners.
Okay.
So you'll see we have chapters, colleagues, community partners. If you go to community partners, you'll have the link to this Friday's meeting with one of our community partners, whose name is
We the people for the people.
We the people, yeah, that's it. We the people for the people. And we're organizing. There's other people organizing. Anna, you're organizing. And I saw Elaine had her hand up also.
Yes.
Yes, I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to ask the gentleman that had mentioned the guardianship program, that you formed a guardianship program. Is that in Miami?
Yes.
And what is that called? Is that part of the ARC you're talking about, or is that a separate?
Well, we did two things. We formed a guardianship program at the ARC, and then we also advocated for more advocacy for people in the community, not necessarily being through the ARC. Just that we wanted parents to know that there would be somebody there to look out for their children.
So the ARC has actual guardianship programs, and I believe I have seen that because I've been on a few of these Zooms.
I just put it in the link to the ARC of South Florida Guardianship Program. It's a great program. They do a lot and they help in many different ways. And so if you're interested in that, and there's a couple other guardianship programs I know of, but the ARC of South Florida I'm very familiar with.
And do you have a list of recommended guardianship programs? And the one that you're talking about in South Florida, that is through the ARC of South Florida?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna take the link.
And I get an opportunity to thank Michael for, Messer for being a mentor for me. We talk every few weeks and he gives me good advice. So just want to tell you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Alan.
Yes,
Yeah,
and you
good.
all spoke beautifully, so I want to thank you. This was really a wonderful Zoom.
It's
And
good to see a few old friends, and I'm really happy that there's a bunch of new people because we need some new blood. As old people don't have much to offer anymore.
I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't say that either. Your story and you know the reality of the whole thing and the way, is it Scott that spoke? Scott, you're from Gainesville?
Oh, that's Mark Swain.
Mark Swain, okay, Mark Swain, I don't know. That he said it exactly as it is, the way he spoke.
Thank you. And I see Kaya's on, another good friend of mine. Thanks for joining, Kaya.
Hey.
Okay, y'all. Well, I want everyone to have a great week and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.